Hello and welcome to the ASPPH Presents webinar series on the new draft Global Health Competencies for the MPH degree. We are very eager to hear your reactions today to the new draft, and the bulk of the webinar time is going to be spent with open lines. That we don't have too many people on today, so for the Q&A section, you are welcome to voice your questions. My name is Liz Weiss, and I'm the Director of Education here at the Association of Schools and Programs of Public Health in Washington, D.C. And I'd like to go through the method for submitting questions there in the upper right-hand corner of your screen at any time. You're welcome to type in your question that you may have, or a comment as well, or they're both welcome. I'm really pleased today to present our two speakers on the call. We have Dr. Margaret Bentley, known as Peggy, and Dr. Bentley is the Carla Smith Chambly Distinguished Professor of Global Health and Associate Dean of Global Health down at the University of North Carolina Gillings School of Global Public Health in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. So pleased to have you with us, Dr. Bentley. Also on board for speaking today is Dr. Elizabeth Abla, who's Associate Professor at the University of Kansas School of Medicine, KU Master of Public Health Program. Thank you both for being with us. Also on the call today, we do have one of our advisory group members, Dr. Martin Ford, so we're pleased to have you on board. I'm going to go ahead and turn over the beginning of the presentation to Dr. Bentley.
Welcome, everyone. I'm so glad you are with us this morning, especially since it's the beginning of a long weekend and perhaps for some of you spring break. So we really are very happy that you're with us. What we're going to do today, we have some learning outcomes here. First, we're going to state the purpose of the draft MPH Global Health Concentration Competency recommendations. Really, why are we doing this? And explain the process that we used to derive the draft recommendations. We've been working on this since 2016, and how we adapted these following the 2016 CEF accreditation guidelines for the MPH degree. And then finally, it will be your turn. We're going to open the lines, and we want you to react to the competencies, ask questions of us, any concerns that you may have, suggestions for how we might improve these competencies. Now, very important is that we are soliciting your comments that would be due to ASPPH on Monday, April 30th, 2018. This is the ASPPH Global Health Competency Team. This is a subcommittee of the Global Health Committee of ASPPH, which is led by Dean Jim Curran at Emory, and he is also on this committee. Myself, Dean John Finnegan from Minnesota, Dean Donna Peterson, who is the chair of ASPPH board from South Florida, Martin Ford, Dr. Martin Ford, who is a member of this committee and on the call today from St. George's, Dr. Maria Ocampo from INSP in Cuernavaca, Mexico, and especially we're delighted to have the new CEO of ASPPH, Dr. Laura Magana, originally of INSP. And I want to especially thank the ASPPH staff, Rita Keller, Dorothy Bilberman, and Liz Weiss, who just spoke earlier, and of course, Elizabeth Ablaw from Kansas. So we launched at a town hall in March at the meeting, the ASPPH annual meeting. We launched these draft competencies and had a very well-attended group with lots of enthusiasm and feedback and suggestions, which we are including in, we will include along with those that you make today. Today it will be your turn. So now I'm going to turn this over to Elizabeth, who has done a tremendous amount of work on this project, and she will take you through the process as well as where we are with our recommendations. So Elizabeth?
Thank you so much, Peggy. I appreciate it. So good morning, everyone. We really appreciate having you on this morning. Want to start with the ASPPH Global Health Competency Model that was developed October of 2011. As you all know, ASPPH, through its Global Health Committee, as Peggy mentioned, is committed to advancing research, education, and practice in global health. And accordingly, they have worked with members and partners across the globe to create and disseminate this model here. 5 years later, as is what is recommended for competencies to be reviewed every 3 to 5 years, the Global Health Committee began an evidence-based process, and so that was in 2016. And the intent was to review and update these competency recommendations in line with changes that had occurred in academia and also in the practice arena to ensure that we were where science is at this point. See if we can go. There we go. So these are the 7 domains associated with that global health competency set that we just saw. So these are probably very familiar to all of you. We had this process, as we've mentioned, it began in 2016, and the process was launched by surveying ASPPH members and also consortium of universities for global health members regarding their use of the 2011 ASPPH Global Health Competencies. Our survey actually produced a 76% response rate from the ASPPH members, and for those we were not able to get through survey, we conducted some telephone interviews with a sample of those non-respondents to further inform our project team. We wanted to make sure that there were really no differences between the responders and the non-responders. So keep in mind, in 2016, the Council on Education for Public Health had just announced that there were some required competencies for the MPH, and that there's also a requirement to have 5 competencies for each specialization. So our team then decided to review, very thoroughly review CEIF's requirements for the MPH. And as a result of that, we see that there are the 12 foundational knowledge objectives for the MPH, and then also 22 foundational competencies for the MPH. So we wanted to make sure that as we reviewed these 12 foundational knowledge and 22 foundational competencies, that they would be informing our global health concentration recommendations. In other words, we needed to ensure that our concentration competencies would be distinct from the CEPH foundational knowledge and competencies. So just a quick shot of a reminder of the CEIF foundational knowledge. There are these 6 here under the profession and science of public health. And then the remainder of the foundational knowledge competencies here, the foundational knowledge factors related to public health. So there were 12 that are specific to foundational knowledge. Moving on to the MPH foundational competencies, there are several domains: the evidence-based approaches to public health and healthcare systems, planning and management to promote health, policy in public health, leadership and communication, and then finally interprofessional practice and systems thinking. I bring this to you today because we want to ensure that you are very clear about our process, and that as in 2016, as CEF was requiring the competencies and the foundational knowledge for the MPH, and then the 5 competencies that would be for any specialization, that we made sure that our project, our competencies would be distinct from those CEF foundational knowledge and competencies. So we conducted our survey, as mentioned before, with our 76 response rate from ASPPH members, and we generated a report from that. Then we conducted the follow-up interviews with the non-responders and submitted a report at that time. We also conducted an extensive review of literature and other models from various schools across the globe. And then finally, we have drafted our global health concentration competencies. And as Peggy mentioned, those were released at the town hall at the ASPPH annual meeting. Before we get to those, I want to make a few demonstrate a few of the assumptions that we are making by releasing these. One is that global health is public health. The health and well-being of individuals across the globe affect the health, safety, and economic security of all nations. Global health is a universal public good that crosses disciplines, sectors, borders, and settings. Advancing global population health requires maximizing community assets and resources. Increasing individual and local capacity and resilience is a valued outcome of partnering for global health. And finally, career pathways for graduates to gain experience in global health include experiential education and practice in local, national, regional, and/or transnational settings. So as you can see, our target audience has really shifted to now specifically the Master of Public Health student, so concentrating in global health upon graduation from a CEPH accredited school or program of public health. We have a few tenets, 3 specifically, that these concentration competencies are built upon these tenets. 1, to inform curricular planning for CEF accredited schools and programs. And this is very key. These are examples to fulfill CEF's requirements for at least 5 distinct competencies for each concentration. So these are voluntary. We are offering them as something that schools and programs can use for voluntary use. 2, to serve as a roadmap to improve education for global health. And then 3, to prepare students upon MPH degree completion with a specialization in global health for a trajectory to assume expert roles in local, national, regional, and transnational settings. So without further ado, we will present our proposed global health concentration competencies for MPH students. The first is to strategize methods for diverse local and global sociocultural and political landscapes. 2, we will analyze the roles, relationships, and resources of the entities influencing global health. Apply ethical approaches in global health research and practice. Design sustainable workforce development strategies for resource-limited settings. Use methods that promote sustainable development and local accountability. Develop strategies to address health equity and social justice challenges in local and global health settings. And finally, display ongoing self-reflection and learning in global health. Again, we present these as draft concentration competencies available for voluntary use. So we will return to these here in a moment. We're very eager to get your feedback. We just want to first give you a little bit of context as why we're thinking how to operationalize these competencies. So we do have additional content and knowledge, skills, and attitudes as drawn from the literature as well from the 2011 master's level global health competencies themselves. And this can serve as useful considerations for concentration competencies or sub-competencies, depending on your school or program's approach. And we do have Appendix A that we would encourage you to check out. In fact, we would encourage you to look at the entire handout. If you go to the very far right of your screen, you will likely see several gray boxes or rectangles, and under there you will see toward the very bottom handouts. And if you click on that handout box, the arrow where it becomes an upside down triangle, you will see that there is an Adobe PDF document that is Global Health Concentration Competencies package. I encourage you to go ahead and click on that at this time, and you'll be able to see as a result of that, it's a 94-page PDF, and beginning on page 3, you will see what we are about to look at here, and that is Appendix A. So this is our companion document for the draft concentration competencies. If you see the next page here, exactly, thank you, the strategized methods for diverse local and global socio-cultural and political landscapes. You'll see here for A through H, these are all sub-competencies or content that is related to and helped to develop this this competency here of competency 1 that we're proposing. To be very clear, we really needed to make sure that we are providing concentration competencies that are distinct from the CEIF foundational competencies and foundational knowledge. And so there was quite a bit of overlap. So we needed to ensure that there was content that we are providing that is distinct from that. You will also see that we have content in here, including notes from surveys and interviews from ASPPH respondents. So we're able to see de-identified how that also informed these competencies. So as we go through here, you can see we have multiple sub-competencies and content that's related to these competencies, and we offer them to you so you have some context as to the derivation of these competencies. So we'll just pop through here at this point, knowing that you have access to this document that is in PDF under the Handouts tab. So finally, as we wind down this portion of the presentation, we really want to get to your feedback. We want you to be aware that we will be providing additional tools for global health faculty for schools and programs. We'll provide guidance on means and methods of promoting and advancing adoption of this model with target faculty audiences for ASPPH members and for partners. We also provide examples through a mini toolkit of how the competencies can be used by educators and also learners. And I have made that larger. I don't know how I did that, so that is really fantastic. Let's see. Okay, I will stop messing around with this. And I think what we'll do, the next slide, excellent. We're going to move to the proposed global health concentration competencies. Again, we have them here for your review. Again, there are 7. And I'd like to turn it over at this time to Liz Weist to help us talk through what our timeline will be for this draft competency set.
Thank you, Elizabeth. That was great. So our timeline is up on the screen now. We've already presented the draft at our town hall a few weeks ago. And then those of you at the CUGH annual meeting might have seen the poster presentation, getting the word out to that constituency. Today's the webinar. Comments are going to be due April 30th. Send them to me at the email there. If you want to call me, that's fine as well, to talk anything through. We're going to give ourselves a few weeks to consider the inputs and to make revisions. And then the advisory group is going to approve a revised final draft that we will present to our board for approval in July. We aim to have their approval on it by the end of July, and then to release those competencies for your voluntary use in August, along with the guidance on means and methods to promote them with your faculty and with your student populations and the mini toolkit that Elizabeth talked about. Okay, so now it's your turn. And since we have about 15 of you on the call, and really that's the magic number, because we said if we have 15 or fewer, we're going to open the lines. We ask you, please, if you're not talking, to put your phone on mute. And please mute, not hold. If you put us on hold, we may hear your hold music. And I'd like to invite Dr. Ford, if you have any comments to make. Dr. Ford is on our advisory group. You'd be welcome at this point. You were a part of that really fascinating town hall discussion that we had in DC a few weeks ago, far-ranging, lots of really good questions. Dr. Ford, is there anything you may wish to comment?
Not at this point, other than to say that these competencies have had a lot of discussion. To reemphasize the point that Elizabeth made, that they can be tweaked with the sub-points that are under their appendix. You can use those and tweak them to areas that your program may specialize. So really, it is the overall competencies, your comments as to whether they represent the area of global health, and if there are any key ones that might have been missed, that will be useful to mention so that we can include them. But they really just provide a good toolkit for anyone with a global health concentration to look at either tweaking what they have, adding one or two of these to what they have.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Dr. Ford. Great, so the lines are open. So we have the 7 proposed global health concentration competencies on the table. They're right there on your screen. So CEIF requirements for a global health concentration, for any concentration, is they want you to present 5. And in talking with CEIF these last few months, as schools and programs are working really hard to get up to speed with the first specific competency requirements ever. So in the prior accreditation standards, CEIF said, hey, you pick your own competencies, whatever you want, fine, make them real, make them work. But now they have specific ones. So what they've noticed is that schools and programs are struggling a little bit to differentiate the concentration competencies from those foundational knowledge areas and the foundational competencies. So we really worked hard, and I'd like for you all to know as well that we did check in with CEPH and we had them review these proposed competencies. And, you know, there was a little back and forth to get them at the level of rigor with the depth and breadth to make them really distinct from the foundational MPH requirements. So while they may be not perfect yet, CEIF thought that, well, these are feasible. These are ones that we could accept from members. And as Dr. Ford said, you know, they're a jumping off point for you. It's not the be all and end all, but ones that, you know, in our 2-year process that we really worked hard to differentiate. So we open the lines now. Do you like these? What do you like about them? What do you think you could use? What's missing? We'd love to hear from you. And if you do speak, would you please state your name and your institution? Lines are open. Question in the question box. So we'll go there while folks are, okay. Here's the question. It's how do these competencies relate to the CUGH global health competencies? Elizabeth, Peggy, which one of you would like to respond to that question?
I can start, and then Elizabeth, who's reviewed both of them very carefully, can add. I would just say, since I'm very involved with CUGH, that the CUGH competencies are much broader. They are really for global health, very, very broadly defined, and not for just the MPH degree-seeking students. Elizabeth, do you want to add to that?
That's excellent. I would only add that the CUGH global health competencies were very similar to the, at the time, ASPPH global health competency model, our version 1.1 that was released in 2011. And this is, so they were very related. This effort is really, as Peggy mentioned, is focused on the MPH student in particular, who is going to be graduating with a concentration or a specialization in global health.
Great, thank you, Elizabeth. We have another question that came into the box here, and it says, we have been working with these competencies to develop competencies for our new MPH global health concentration, and we found a major gap. There was nothing related to monitoring and evaluation of global health programs, which we believe are a set of skills that are more advanced than the core evaluation competencies that are part of the SEAF requirements. We think that there is the need to incorporate an M&E, monitoring and evaluation competency, or add M&E language into one of these existing ones. Peggy or Elizabeth, thoughts on that? Or we'll start with you two, and then I'll open up to other comments, because it'd be good to hear others' reactions, but Peggy and Elizabeth first.
Let me start, because I think I know who posed that question. And I would just have to say I agree with it. I think that the reason M&E isn't in this right now is that when we did this, we saw that the foundational competencies of SEAF actually do talk a lot about monitoring and evaluation. We include an M&E for global health concentration. We need to think very hard about how it can be distinct, and we would welcome feedback on how we could do that. I would just also add that SEAF is requiring a minimum of 5 competencies. 7 or 8 are fine, and people can choose among what we're offering for some of their competencies as well. Elizabeth, do you want to add to that?
Thanks. Yeah, I think your point is a very good one. In D2, the foundational competencies from SEAF, if you look at 11, you will see select methods to evaluate public health programs. And yeah, so we, as you know, probably from the 2011 global health competency model, we did have a competency develop, monitoring, and evaluation frameworks to assess programs. So we did think that that was related, very tightly related to that 11 competency. So I'd love to know your thoughts, and if you think there is a way that it is distinct and therefore needs to be drawn out in the global health concentration competencies.
Mm-hmm. Great. We'll look for any comments in response to that question or post-call. If anyone wants to send specific language, that really helps, and we can consider that. Here's another question, and I'm really glad you brought this up, because I knew that there was a group to whom I wanted to make sure had our competency draft for comment, and it's the planetary health group, and I just hadn't reached out to them yet. The question is the planetary health and Anthropocene consistent with global health?
This is Elizabeth. So in D1, the MPH Foundational Public Health Knowledge, there is the number 12 under factors related to human health, explain an ecological perspective on the connections of human health, animal health, and the ecosystem's health, e.g. One Health. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure if I'm referencing this appropriately to the question, but if that's what you're asking, if we did think that was connected to planetary health and the work that's been done there under D112.
Mm-hmm. You could see it there on your screen. Okay. Here's another one. And it's asking if global, I believe, if I'm reading it right, will global health MOOCs, massive open online courses, be available in the future?
I don't understand that question. What, could you repeat it?
I'm flipping it because it's listed will be available global health MOOCs in the future. I think there's an interest in global health MOOCs, massive open online courses, and the question seems to be about their availability in the future.
I'm not sure how to answer that. I think there already are several global health MOOCs out there, so I'm not too clear what the question is in context of these competencies and the work that we've done. I mean, certainly the MOOCs would be able to review these and pick up on them for their own curriculum if that's what they decided to do.
You know, something that the Association of Schools and Programs of Public Health, we're starting to move towards with our new president and CEO, Dr. Laura Magana, is more assistance for our membership with your teaching, research, and practice needs. And so you're going to start to see this year more faculty development supports and also more learning objects. We are actually in the process of thinking about a learning management system for faculty to tap in to gain skills that you could take in teaching and improving student learning outcomes. So I think this question may speak a little to that, and global health is a major interest for our association. So I would say stay tuned for ASPPH specific. I'm not sure about a MOOC, but ASPPH specific global health supports for faculty for your teaching. Here's a comment. It's a reaction to the monitoring and evaluation input that we got, and it says, good point regarding M&E. What about the full range of program development, including budget development and management? So while Peggy and Elizabeth consider the answer for that, I'm going to walk to that section of the CEPH requirements.
Excellent. Yeah, if you go to D210. Yep, exactly. Yep. So under CEPH planning and management to promote health, the 10th competency is explain basic principles and tools of budget and resource management. It is really amazing to me how comprehensive the CEPH foundational knowledge and competencies have been in capturing many of the competencies that were once in the 2011 competency model. So yeah, for global health. So yep, we had the same sort of response. Thanks for that question.
And as you saw with Elizabeth's answer, these a number of questions that we've gotten to this point, they push us back to go look at the CEPH requirements. So that toggling back and forth, and that's our challenge as faculty, trying to differentiate. And you don't want to duplicate, but rather build upon the CEPH foundational requirements. And for your concentration, you want to take your students deeper, further, more depth, breadth, increase that rigor. So they're taking it to a different level. So you'll find us with a number of these questions. We'll go back to the CEPH and we'll say, hey, well, it appears to be here. And if it doesn't, that's when we ask ourselves, well, does it need to be brought into the 7 or however number that we, in the end, come up with as the recommendations, again, for your voluntary consideration.
This is Peggy. Let me just add something here. I think a lot of the concern related to not having, for example, M&E as part of the global health competency, concentration competencies, is because people are very concerned that MPH core will not have enough examples of global in them. And so I think that's something we all need to think about. If, for example, a school has mostly domestic examples of tools of budget and resource management or of M&E, then that probably isn't going to be adequate for the complexities of working in places all around the world. So I'm not answering a question, I'm making a comment about why I think some of these questions about why isn't it there when in fact it's in the foundation competencies of CEF. I don't know if anybody'd like to add to that.
Okay, folks can jump in later. Here's another good question. Given the prominence of complex emergencies arising from political and other adverse situations and the impact on global health, should economics be included as a major focus in number 1? I would suggest so. Complex emergencies and its economic issues have a huge impact on health outcomes, strategies, capacities in several countries. And this is from St. George's University. So let's go back to our proposed competencies. There's a lot here, so just a sec. There we are. Let's put the 7 up again. So if I'm reading it right, the question is, should economics be included there in the first one?
So I'd be curious as to what exactly in economics you're referring to, if it's the economics of the location.
St. George's, the lines are open if you'd like to unmute yourself and answer the question. You may be on mute, or feel free to type back into the question box.
In the meantime, I can say, in terms of I think the context is complex emergencies from these various political and other adverse situations. I do know that in the 2011 Global Health Competency Model, there was under ethical reasoning and professional practice, what was 3.2, analyze ethical and professional issues that arise from responding to public health emergencies. That was the closest thing to, I believe, what you're referencing in terms of the emergency. And if you go to Appendix A on page 5, you will see that there is the emergence, that is one of the components. It is actually knowledge E for the third. Thanks. Yeah, there you go. Perfect. Yeah, so analyze ethical and professional issues that arise. So that has become under the ethical approach. So please, yeah, if there's something that you think is distinct from that, please share your thoughts, and that would be really useful.
Great. Okay. Here's another one. CPH Competency 11 just says select methods to evaluate public health programs. We think that global health concentration MPH students will not just select methods, but will need to develop their own to evaluate complex global health programs. At UNC, we are considering the following language. Develop skills for monitoring and evaluating the process and outcomes of global health programs and policies as an extension of the basic CPH competencies. So I'll repeat that. At UNC, the proposed language is develop skills for monitoring and evaluating the processes and outcomes of global health programs and policies.
This is Elizabeth. Yeah, if you'll see under our, well, we that is one of the components that we used, the UNC concentration in global health, and as some of the one of the models that we had reviewed, and I believe you are correct that it is definitely at a higher level than CEF 11 select methods to evaluate public health programs. So you've elevated that. Yeah, I'm curious to know others' thoughts if that is distinct enough of a difference from the CEF competency. That's really helpful. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, here's another question. It's regarding the first proposed competency, strategize. What exactly does strategize methods for diverse local and global sociocultural and political landscapes mean? Specifically, methods to accomplish what? And how is use methods to promote sustainable development a competency? So we're looking at the first one, strategize methods to accomplish what? They're asking about the ends for number one, and then how is number 5, use methods to promote sustainable development and local accountability a competency?
This is Elizabeth. So your point is a very good one. The first concentration competency that we're proposing, we've received some feedback about strategized methods, and is that really a competency? What are we strategizing methods for? So we know the population that we're strategizing methods, but what are we strategizing methods about, or to what end? So that is useful if you have any suggestions, especially considering what is listed as A through H plus a note from an ASPPH interviewee as the sub-competencies and content from which that arose. That would really be useful to know your thoughts on that.
And why don't I go to the 5th one? I'll pull up in Appendix A. So the 5th competency is there with the sub-content and potential sub-competencies to help build it up or build it out. So the question for that is, how is this one a competency?
So as you see, the first 3 sub-competencies are to identify methods for assuring program sustainability or something very similar. I think the idea was that we needed to bump this up, and that it needed to be higher than understanding or to be able to identify methods, that in the Bloom's taxonomy scale of verbs, we needed to make this a higher level. And so implementation was really more at the level of this. So I think that's where this was derived. And again, would love any feedback. As Liz mentioned, any sort of verbiage that you could provide would be exceptionally useful. Any critiques would be great as well. We really appreciate this.
This is Liz at ASPPH. Elizabeth mentioned Bloom's taxonomy. And so we're dealing with MPH level students. That's the practice degree. And we've kind of been keeping in mind that for master's level, we want to get them beyond sort of the basics, as Elizabeth said, beyond the identify. So use methods, use is what we call in Bloom's taxonomy, a level 3 verb. It's the implement kind of level. And that really is appropriate for MPH students. So perhaps it could use some fleshing out, but we really were getting, with this competency, pushing for the Master of Public Health student to be able to demonstrate, to show behavior that he or she can select and not just pick them out, identify them, but actually use them. How would you do that? You could do a role play. You could, there's lots of different ways. And we don't have it here, but ASPPH has a really good tool, learning taxonomy sort of list and examples of ways that you might assess the sort of learning experiences that you might use to assess how a student has demonstrated using methods to do something. Okay, here's another comment, and it's some more support. It says, could add economic landscape in number 1. So that point's well taken. We're having more support for that. Fleshing out number 1. I'm going to back up to number 1 here. There we go. You could see that some of the subcontent there, economic, some folks already would consider it in that, in the purview, pulling in the economics there. So that's good. Thank you for that.
If you have suggestions for changes in the wording of any of these, please make sure that you send those to us or make a comment now. This is Peggy, and I'm really curious if anyone has looked at Competency 7, which is a completely new one, and we would really like some feedback on that one, which is display ongoing self-reflection and learning in global health.
Okay, we will look forward to a comment on that. We have a little over 10 minutes left. I'll go to the next one now, Peggy, while folks consider what they think about that number 7. And here's another one. Along with a One Health focus comes the importance of cross-interprofessional collaboration, not just in health, but across professions, as well as across academia, nonprofit, and corporate sectors. This is particularly key when working globally. What competencies address this? And I'm going to walk us back. I wish I put it closer in here.
I know, I think, Erin, that's a really great point. So part of the MPH foundational competencies from CEF is this interprofessional practice in performing effectively on interprofessional teams is definitely a component of the foundational competencies. So CEF really hit the nail on the head trying to get this really comprehensive set of skills for MPH students.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Elizabeth. And there it is on your screen. It's MPH Foundational Competency number 21. Any of you who might have sat in on CEPH's compliance review presentation update just a few days ago, they gave an analysis of what they found in all the schools and program submissions for their compliance reviews that were due January 8th. And this one, Competency 21, perform effectively on interprofessional teams, was the one that had the least compliance in their view, that folks weren't quite there yet in effectively demonstrating that they were teaching this and assessing it appropriately in their schools and programs. So ASPPH, we're working hard to support your getting up to speed and also to build collaborative relationships with, like you said, in the question, with across academe and with practice and even corporate and other partners, which is particularly important in the global health world. And we work with the Interprofessional Education Collaborative and many other partners to do that. In fact, we're hosting a faculty skill building institute here in DC in a little over a month to help you get up to speed with this interprofessional work that is more and more important every year. So I'm going to check the question box here for anything else. Okay, here's another one. And it's going back to CEF Competency 11. So I'm going to go to that. CEF Competency 11 just says select methods to evaluate public health programs. We think that global health concentration, MPH students will not just select methods, but will need to develop their own to evaluate complex global health. Did I already ask this question?
think
Yes.
so, but it sounds even better the second time.
Okay, yeah, maybe this has more depth. Okay.
It does.
Students will need to develop their own to evaluate complex global health programs. At UNC, we are considering the language, okay, back to develop skills for monitoring and evaluating the processes and outcomes of global health programs and policies as an extension of the basic CEEF competency.
Yeah, it's really useful.
Okay, so sorry if I stumbled back to a prior question, or maybe you were putting it in a different way.
I think she was, yeah.
Okay. Okay, so here's one on the self-reflection. So we're going back to this number 7, Peggy, your prompt. Okay, just give me a sec to get to that. Whoops. I'm not able to advance this screen, maybe because I made the screen bigger. Here we go. Here we go. So let's pull up our proposals again. Okay, thanks for your patience. Here we go. I have a similar question with Competency 7. Display ongoing self-reflection did not feel like an advanced competency in global health to me. Okay.
Could you pull up Appendix 1 for that one? So.
Oh, yeah, that sounds good. Let's do it. Let's go to that. Yes, because we find the. Okay. There we go, Peggy. Other thoughts? I mean, folks are welcome to type in, or do you agree that this one, number 7, display ongoing self-reflection and learning in global health, does that feel right? Is that something you would successfully want your students to demonstrate upon graduation with this global health concentration?
I would just add that at the town hall, there was quite a bit of discussion about this one, and people actually thinking it was a very important competency that that actually be part of what students are doing for this concentration.
I think we did have, Liz at ASPPH again, we did have some commentary that, yes, really important, but maybe a person or two said, but isn't that something that all of us should be requiring of our students regardless of their concentration? And also, there's a little bit in this that we changed this one because I think at one point in the development process, it might have spoken too much to practice, because the competencies we're suggesting here would need to be demonstrated upon graduation. So of course, while the students are in your house, under your roof, whether it's brick and mortar or not, but this applies to sort of setting the foundation that propels them once they're out, or maybe they're ongoing with their education, training, we hope the whole life. There's lifelong learning, but it does speak to what you want happening in practice as well. But we made it specific here that for them to demonstrate that before they leave with their degree, that they do have a commitment and they're displaying this ongoing activity, this ongoing self-reflection, lifelong learning, and specific to global health. Other thoughts are welcome on that. All right, here's another question. What would be an advanced competency that a global health concentration student would demonstrate for Competency 7 that would be different from any other MPH student? Kind of getting at what I just said there. Peggy and Elizabeth? This would be the last question.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Nope, I'm just saying it's the last one.
Well, I see that there's a comment about it being excellent, and that it's so broad, and it's good to stress that students must learn throughout their lives. Although the ongoing is really, at this point at least, to be measured during the time that they're in the MPH program. And I see there's another question regarding how do you measure this? How do you measure this display? And I think that several programs have debriefings, have like journal-like activities where the student is to reflect on their location, reflect on their own self-assessments, and think about how they are to apply that to their ongoing professional career and their own life situation. So yeah, there are different ways that, and again, I think that can be really useful to have some examples so we can, for any of the concentration competencies that are advanced, so that different schools and programs are able to operationalize this in ways and start thinking about how these can be measured.
Mm-hmm. Great, thanks, Elizabeth. Those are really super questions. Great conversation. Thank you all for your participation. We're going to wrap her up here, get to the end. I want to thank our presenters, Dr. Bentley, Dr. Abla, for your terrific leadership for this project. It's been wonderful working with all of you. Thank you all on the call for your participation. We have recorded this webinar. It will be available as archived webinar on this page. Just give us a few hours. We usually get it done within a day or so to post it. I neglected to mention we are offering Certified in Public Health continuing education credits, 1 hour, for your participation in this event. And also we have some coming attractions. So coming up in April, we're having ASPPH Presents as our brand for our webinar series, Student Services Spotlight, Conversations about Orientation. And then in May, a really interesting simulation game approach to learning. It's called Reacting to the Past. It's out of Barnard College, and it's going to go through a really interesting example of John Snow's cholera epidemic and the use of the Broad Street pump in a simulation. So those are just 2 coming up. We look forward to hearing you back. And again, remember, please, the April 30th deadline. We have captured everything you said on this webinar. We're going to translate all the questions, the back and forth, re-listen, and if you have already commented either verbally or in the question box, you do not need to repeat that and spend your time. We've captured it. But if you have anything additional, send it to me, please, eweist@aspph.org before the deadline of April 30th. So the webinar is complete, and we thank you for your time and hope you have a terrific Friday.
Thank you.
Thank you.